Hello, this is Jay Carpenter of the Phone Word Forum, and today is Wednesday, November the 30th, 2011, and it is approximately 3:55 p.m. on East Coast time, New York time, and today we're going to be having Phone Word Forum addressing Australia, what their model is for allocating telephone numbers, and in particular their version of toll-free telephone numbers. And we expect numerous people to be joining us, and we'll be talking about, we'll also be talking with some of their top shared use providers. So that's what we have going. Hello, this is Jay Carpenter of the Phone Word Forum, and today is Wednesday, November the 30th, 2011. It's approximately 3:57 p.m. Eastern Time, New York time, and today we have a panel of guests from Australia that will be joining us, and they will be talking about the Australian market-based allocation method for their version of toll-free numbers, which has been going on since 2004. And we have three people from the Australian Communications and Media Authority. And we'll also have at least three people from the top three Australian phone word providers, what we would call shared use providers here in the United States, joining us. So I expect it'll be a lively and valuable conversation. Hello?
Don Gray, Nebraska Public Service Commission.
Hey, Don. It's
Hey,
Jay.
Jay.
Expect quite a few people to be joining us today.
Good.
So appreciate you joining, Don.
You bet. I'll hang in as long as I can here.
All right, great. It's like 8 a.m. or going on 8 a.m. in Australia, so I hope these folks, hope their alarm clocks were working today.
Oh, but their clocks go backwards, right?
That's right. Good point. I hope they can understand our accents here in North America. So, anyway, appreciate your help with getting this out to the fawn list.
Oh, no problem. Adam was the one that was taking care of it for you, as usual.
Good. Good. Did you get a new phone recently? Is that? Hello?
Hi, it's Tim Denton.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
I'm well.
I'd like to introduce you to Don Gray of Nebraska. Don has been very active in the regulatory circles. Tim is a commissioner on the Canadian equivalent of the FCC. Yeah, right. So.
Glad to meet you, Tim.
Hi, Don.
So. Hello.
Scott Richards from Dial 800.
Hi, Scott. Welcome.
Hey, Jay.
I'll feel a lot better when we hear the folks from Australia. I'm trying a new conference service, which is international conference line from freeconferencecall.com. So
right.
This is a new venture.
No problem.
We did a little testing last week, and it worked fine, but you never know until it's actually working. The other thing that I've gone over and over is trying to synchronize the times. So I had a call about a month or two ago, just about the time that the time changed, and everything was all didn't quite work out. So
No problem. I'm going to put it on mute and work while I'm waiting, okay?
absolutely. Hello? Tom.
Hi, it's Alia.
Hi, Alia. Hi, Tom.
How are you, Jay?
Well, I'll be very well when the folks from Australia join us.
What time is it there?
It is 8 a.m. there.
Oh, not too bad.
Not too bad. When I originally put this together, it looked like it was going to be 6 a.m. So fortunately, the time changed for the better. Hello?
David Greenhouse?
Hello, David.
Hey, Jay,
David.
how are you?
Scott Richards. Hi, Aaliyah.
Hi, how are
Hey,
you?
how are you, Scott?
Fantastic here in sunny Southern California.
Hello? By the way, people don't have to announce themselves on the phone word forum.
Good morning, everyone. This is Philip Sandicoe, Susan Horn, Dougal Heath from the Australian Communications and Media Authority.
Awesome. I'm delighted to hear you, and thank you very much for getting up early in the morning there and joining us. So.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
All right.
Is
Well, I'm going to go ahead and...
Is anybody else having trouble hearing him?
I am. I'm having trouble hearing him as well.
Okay.
You're having
Okay.
trouble hearing us in Australia?
Yeah, you guys are a little bit soft.
Okay.
Are you on a speakerphone, or are you dialing in separately?
We're on a speakerphone. Is that any better?
That's a little bit better. If you could just please speak loudly, we would appreciate it. Hello?
Hi. Hi, Sue Kong. Hi, Jay.
Hi, Sue. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to go ahead and get started since we've got a short amount of time today. And, first of all, I'd just like to say I'm absolutely delighted for you folks from Australia to join us today. I know it's asking a bit to get up, at 8 a.m. and be ready by 8 a.m. to join the call. But people here are most interested in what you've been doing for the last 7 years in Australia, and I know that Susan, Dougal, and Philip have been some of the key people involved in the, from the regulatory side in having an open market for your version of toll-free telephone numbers. So I'd like to just go ahead and turn it over to Philip. And Philip, if you could just start telling us a little bit about how things work there, what's going on currently, and I know that some of the folks on the call will have some questions.
Okay. I might actually, the two of us will talk briefly about the arrangements here. Susan will talk about the arrangements as they currently work. But we're also looking at reviewing the allocation arrangements here as well, and I'll talk about those possible changes.
Yeah, good morning. It's Laz here from Telsmart in Melbourne, Australia.
Hello, Laz. Welcome.
Good morning, Jay.
Philip is just getting started talking about the regulatory side from Australia.
Okay,
And
great.
Jay, this is Karen Mulberry. I joined as well.
Hi, Karen. Welcome.
Hi.
Sorry, we might be a bit hard still to hear. Susan Horn is going to give us a brief description of the way the arrangements currently work. But we're also looking at reviewing the allocation arrangements here, and I will give an update about that.
Hi, it's Susan Horn here. The arrangements up until 2004, when the auctions commenced, was we had only over-the-counter administrative allocation processes. So we had single number allocation of our free phone and local rate numbers by an industry not-for-profit body called the INMS, and the ACMA administered all of the remaining numbers.
Susan, this is Jay. Can you speak really loudly into the phone? I'm sorry to ask that of you, but it's it's really quite soft.
I'll bring the phone closer as well.
Great, that's much better.
Good. From late 2004, we introduced what we call smart numbers auctions. All numbers in the smart numbers pool have a reserve price, and that price is currently between $250,000 and $20,000 per number. The majority in that pool, however, have the reserve price of the lowest price of $250. I should also note that in addition to the free phone numbers that are in the US, Australia also has another type of number known as local rate, and that's a shared cost number where the caller pays no more than a local call, and business picks up any residual cost if there is any. Now, a number that's obtained by the smart numbers auction process is different to an administratively allocated number and offers the successful purchaser a number of advantages. So rather than going to a provider to get a number, customers can cherry pick, in effect, from all of the available numbers in the smart numbers auction pool. Once the successful purchaser obtains the number by the auction, they can be held for up to 3 years without a service. This is dramatically different to other numbers, where once service is relinquished on the number, the customer no longer has any rights to use that number. The successful purchaser can also legitimately trade, lease, or sell the number. That is, the arrangement
Michael Evans.
assume and facilitate an active secondary market. So in conclusion, some sort of observations about the auction or some statistics. We have about 18,500 registrants in the smart numbers auction system. Around about 45,000 numbers have been auctioned since 2004, and about 10,000 of those auctions have been contested. And around $41 million has also been raised since we began the process. That's a sort of a quick overview, and I'll pass over to Philip now to talk about how things might change.
Can I ask a couple questions first? Okay.
Go ahead.
Can I ask a question just to make sure I understand?
Sure, absolutely.
So the numbers that are in this auction, how is it determined which numbers go into the auction? The smart numbers?
Basically, everything that starts with 1-800 and 13, our local rate numbers, they've all been placed into the pool. So basically, customers can choose from any of those numbers which have a status of available. That means they've not already been given to or successfully purchased by a customer, pretty well everything.
I guess I'm confused because there were three.
I was going to add to that, Dougal here in Melbourne as well. Your question may also be around the pricing of the numbers. When we set the system up in 2004, we split the with regard to the reserve price. The numbers with the highest value that Susan mentioned, like $20,000 numbers, are numbers that may have patterning, like 222, 222, or 123, 123. And we also attempted to put a word value on numbers. So numbers that spelt words out of the dictionary were also attributed a higher value than their base value numbers. So the $250 numbers are the numbers that really don't spell anything and have no number patterning. All the other numbers which have higher value may have a word value or number patterning associated with them.
And what happens, one of the registrants, if they're interested in a particular number, they can nominate it for auction, and we run those auctions regularly. So it's basically anything which hasn't currently been allocated is available. If somebody's interested in it, they can nominate it for auction.
Okay, so then I guess what I'm confused about is the flip side. So what are the free numbers?
Oh, free numbers. Okay, that's our alternative system where people can go to a provider and get a number that's administratively allocated. We excise a small quantity of numbers out of the Smart Numbers auction pool of the lowest possible value and pass them over to our administratively allocated process. And then a customer just goes to a provider and says, I don't care what number I get, I just like to have a free phone or a local rate number. And they get that number via that process.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, Alia, you can go on their Smart Number auction site and you can see the auction process and how people basically nominate a particular number that they would like to purchase or put up, have in the auction and then bid upon, if I'm correct in my summary. But I think, Susan, what you're bringing up is a very strong point, that there's basically the best of both worlds in your system. If somebody wants a number and they don't really care what it spells, they can go in and get it for essentially free, or I assume there's some nominal connection charge. But if they want a number that would serve a particular purpose for their marketing efforts or whatever, that whatever it spells is important to their business, they can go through the auction process and basically secure that number based upon price versus being first in line through a first come first serve, or hoping for the best out of the spare pool.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah. Okay.
As Susan mentioned, those arrangements have been in place since 2004-05. It's been a few years now. The ACMA is currently reviewing the allocation arrangements for free phone and local rate numbers. When the arrangements were introduced back in 04-05, significant proportion of the approximately 10,000 auctions held were contested, and around 50% of the revenue from the system was generated from contested auctions. With the exception of a small spike when we lowered the reserve prices in 2010, both the number of contested auctions and the revenue they have generated has trended downwards. For example, last year in 2010-11, around 5,400 numbers were auctions, and about 6% of the revenue came from contested auctions. The purposes for setting up the auction system were to ensure that a number was allocated to its highest value use and to generate a fair return from the number. And given the decline in the number of contested auctions, there's a bit of a question about whether an auction process is the best way of meeting those two aims. The ACMA is currently undertaking a review of longer-term numbering arrangements. And as part of that review, we've raised the possibility of ceasing the auctioning of the rights of use to smart numbers and moving to a more administrative allocation system where the number is available for purchase at a set price, possibly the current reserve price. Interested parties would be able to purchase the number at a cost similar to what they would likely need to pay now, but would gain the advantage of being able to get more rapid access to the number without having to wait for the auction process to be completed. The ACA would gain from having a administratively simpler and cheaper allocation system to manage. We're currently consulting on a general approach to moving from an auction to an administrative allocation system for rights of use. But if we do decide to move down that path, we'd need to undertake likely fairly extensive consultation on the regulatory instruments we'd need to put in place to implement the change. These instruments would include the detail of how the new arrangements would work. Our time frame for looking at this work's quite ambitious in that we would like to have any new arrangements in place at the start of the new Australian financial year, which is 1 July 2012. The current discussion or the consultation paper, which is out on this amongst other issues, is available on the ACMA website, and I think comments close something like the 15th of January. The paper was only released this week, so it's all fairly new.
And Philip, this is Jay. Would you say that the primary driver for your interest in making the change is that it sounds to me like kind of the interest in the auction process has sort of dwindled over the last few years?
It's probably fair to say that the numbers show that there is still interest out there in purchasing the rights of use, but that where particular numbers are auctions, there may be less contests for particular numbers, so that if the number is allocated, it would be more likely to be sold at the reserve price, but there's not a contest pushing the price up above that.
Mm-hmm. Would one of you please tell us a little bit about how the secondary market works? Because my view of how your whole process has worked, it's all the numbers that have been auctioned have basically been new issue. So, in other words, it's sort of like these numbers hadn't been used before. Is that basically correct?
Hi, Jay, it's Dougal here. The secondary market arrangements, so we anticipated those. The ACMA sells numbers to whoever pays its registration. Now, whether that's a small business, a mum and dad wanting it, or a larger investment company who may sell those later. So we don't care as long as they pay their registration fee. Anyone's entitled to get the number through the auction. Out of the numbers we've sold, I think Susan mentioned about 40,000 numbers. About half of those have gone to sort of what we call larger businesses, and those larger businesses, in a way, you could call we call those sort of investors, and they often buy those for the purposes of leasing or reselling those to other people that are interested in the numbers. Whether that's now or in 12 months' time or longer period, that's up to them. They may have different business models as far as bundling those numbers with other services. That's a completely separate separate line of business that they manage that we're not interested in. I know Les is on the line, so he might be able to explain further sort of how their models work.
Good morning, Dougal. Les here from Melbourne. Telsmart. What we primarily do is, back in 2004 and continuing after that, we bought a suite of numbers from Smart Numbers, and some of them are generic words, 1300 builder, 13 cabs, and so forth. So we've bought a lot of these numbers, and we actively market them to corporate Australia, and as Dougal said, we bundle them sometimes with telco, so we include telco, and we also sell numbers depending on the whatever commercial value we get for a number. So we either license a number for a set period of time, or we sell the numbers. But we have an association body, the Australian Phone Word Association, and we actively promote phone words, the concept, the benefits. We do research about the awareness of phone words in Australia. And so we inadvertently promote smart numbers to hundreds of thousands of businesses within Australia and create the demand. And also help create the demand of smart numbers in Australia.
And Laz, what can you give us some examples of how these numbers have been implemented by some of the businesses down in Australia, and what have the benefits been? What sort of issues have you encountered? Can you go over the pros and the cons a little bit, if you would, please?
Jay, there's been some businesses have modeled, have created a new business based on a phone word, like 1-300 home loan. So they're out created a new business model based solely around the phone word model. The brand is their phone word, similar to what you guys have in the US with, I think, 1-800-Flowers.
Mm-hmm.
So there are businesses out there that model themselves around a phone word or a smart number. There are other businesses that want a phone word because it matches their brand. Now, I suppose the benefits are there's a lot of research. There's research on our website, 1300telsmart.com.au, and there's all other players in the marketplace. There's a lot of benefits of increasing higher call volumes once they've advertised a phone word compared to a numeric number. So what happens is, someone spends maybe say $10,000 on radio commercials with a phone word. They could potentially double that or triple the response by using a phone word.
Great. Thank you.
So basically, it just increases the response rate, and if it's their brand, like 13Coke, have their brand 13Coke as their inbound number. Telstra have, they have 13Telstra, 1300 Telstra. They have also 1300 Business. So some companies have multiple phone words depending on the stream or the area of the business that they want to define.
Great.
Jay, I was just going to add, it's Dougal here again. Just so we're clear, the ACMA through its auction system only sells numbers. We don't sell phone words. So we sell a number that may be converted into a phone word, and obviously through a keypad, the number 2 can be an A, B, or a C. So it's up to the person that purchases the number or the rights to use the number to decide how they use that. They may use that just as a number, or it may be turned into a phone word. So as I said, that's up to the purchaser.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Dougal, for that clarification. Well, I'd like to open it up for the folks on the line to ask any questions you might have at this point, or have any comments.
Jay, this is Tom. I've got a question. So all of the numbers that are in the Australian auction would be similar to what we just experienced with the 855 release. They're all previously unused numbers.
Hi, this is Susan. That's absolutely correct. We had a set of numbers up until 2004 that a number of ranges had been allocated to providers. So subsets of that were actually in use with a customer. What we did was we took those numbers from providers that weren't in use, together with the unused numbers that we had at the ACMA, and created the Smart Numbers auction pool.
Okay, thank you.
This is Alia. When you
Go ahead, Alia.
Okay. When you converted to this originally, did you at the same time open up the secondary market for numbers that were already in use?
What we have sort of already talked about is the ability to go to the INMS and get a number that people don't cherry pick. That doesn't come with enhanced rights of use, the ability to trade and sell and have the number without service. Those are sort of administratively allocated numbers, and all of the numbers that were already out there continue to be administered under the rules that were already in place for them. Only the numbers that you get via the auction pool do you get these additional rights.
Okay, so if you had 800 flowers and it was already out in the market at the time you made this change, it didn't become sellable.
That's absolutely correct. It would have to be returned to the provider and then be placed into the Smart Numbers auction pool, because all numbers, however they're allocated, when the rights of use are lost.
Whoops, sorry.
It would have to be sold via the auction pool to become 1-800 flowers and have the ability to trade and sell it.
Okay.
So hey, this is Don.
Go ahead, Don.
One of the questions that we've had here in the United States that we're still struggling with as to whether we can get by it or not, and Jay may have discussed this with you, is that the current rules and regulations at a federal level do not distinguish between our traditional telephone numbers that are used by consumers and the what we call 800 or toll-free numbers that we're talking about now. Further, the same rules and regulations don't provide or allow for the sale or barter of any phone numbers. And I'm wondering if you had similar rules in 2004 that you had to get changed or overcome before you could go to the auction basis.
I suppose the answer is yes. We did. We had a system that was based on the allocation of numbers to providers and then the issue of numbers to consumers. Once the service was disconnected, the customer lost all rights to those numbers. So we had limited arrangements where numbers could be sort of traded or passed on to another party. So, for example, if a business changed hands, it wasn't sort of prevented them passing it, sort of that number going over to the new business holder, as long as a provider was prepared to accept the new customer, But we had to go through a process of changing our legislation, putting it out for public comment, and setting up entirely new rules, rules that, had never been tried in Australia before.
I was just going to add to that. One of our limitations is that numbers in Australia can only be allocated to carriage service providers, basically telephone companies, and trying to come up with new arrangements for these particular numbers to give the end user some sort of right to the number, which is where our concept of enhanced rights of use comes from, which was a special arrangement we had to put in place to facilitate the auctioning of the numbers.
So this is Michael Evans. Just following up on Don's question, how long did it take, or how long was the process to make the changes that you were just referring to?
I think it actually started quite a long time ago. Like it started in, or discussion about this sort of proposal started in the 1998-99 sort of vicinity, broadly. But I think it really gathered steam in sort of 2001, 2002. So, by the end of 2002, it really, gathered some legs, and we implemented the first auction in, I think, August 2004. So it probably took, about 2 years to make all the changes, do the public consultation, all that sort of thing.
And to add to that as well, one of the things that we had to grapple with was it went all the way up to ministerial level to sort of get permission and to get this process started. And I think that was sort of around the 2002 time.
So I was just going to add one other thing too, which is a bit of an aside. The original arrangements allowed for what we call charities to obtain numbers at a slightly cheaper price. There was some concern when this system was introduced in 2004 that obviously, like in America, there's some very large charities that would get quite a deal of value in obtaining numbers that perhaps spelt the name of whatever that charity might be. I'm trying to think of an example, Alcoholics Anonymous or something like that, or whatever. But they were given preferential access to numbers at a lower price. So in other words, the big companies or anyone else didn't come in and sort of get a number that would be useful for a charity. I think in about 2010, we actually removed that because the arrangements were getting pretty complex for charities, and anyway, we've gone to the more simplified method where everybody's treated the same.
Great.
So just as a follow-up to that, as you, now that this has been in operation for 7 years, from a lessons learned perspective, if you had it to do over again, are there certain things that you would choose to do or not to do?
I suppose one of the things would be to consider more closely whether we would have had a charity or a preferential process for charities. That would have been one thing that I would have considered. Mm-hmm. And another would be the frequency of auctions. So, for example, we only run auctions every second Wednesday, and we have a closing date for people to place a number into the next auction, and that's got to be 4 working days before the actual auction. So that closes on the intervening Wednesday. So they would be the two major things that I would think of. I'm not sure if Dougal has any others to add. Oh, and actually, there's another issue which we grapple with, and that is we actually make available numbers at very short notice on the basis of an emergency being something to do with life or limb. So a recall because of faulty brakes or, peanuts in chocolate that's a danger to people's health. Those arrangements don't work perfectly in all circumstances.
Okay, thank you.
So you make numbers available if there's an emergency like life or limb?
Absolutely. Did one very recently for an organisation known here as Lifeline. I'm not sure if you have it, but it's an emergency or a crisis counselling service. And we made a number available for them for 35 days, and that was extracted from the Smart Numbers auction pool and provided to them for around about a month.
All right. So just to, that should be okay. So we just pulled the cord out. We occasionally get calls from companies that have run a large advertising campaign that have printed off 100,000 leaflets or something like that with the wrong 1-800 number or the wrong 1-300 number. And as Susan was saying, the only two ways to get the numbers is through the administrative process, a number straight off the shelf, or through the auction system. So these large companies, come to us sort of in dire straits, saying they've just released a large advertising campaign, and they need the number sort of straight away because people will start ringing that number. And as Susan said, unless it's an emergency situation, life or limb, we don't really have the capacity to give them that number, and they really have to just wait till the next auction.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll kind of turn the tables a little bit and ask and open it up for any questions. Susan, Dougal, Philip, Laz, what questions do you have of us here in North America regarding how our system works?
This is Susan. I actually had one about how, if anybody's able to explain to me about the using multiple providers in the delivery of 1-800 services. I'm not sure from a paper that I read I properly understand how that works.
Okay.
Nor do we.
Well, that's not.
And we're all in the same boat. Actually, Alia, I'll let you take that because that's kind of your specialty. Alia Kristofferson is, just to kind of introduce her, runs a company that is called a Responsible Organization and handles some of the major companies in the United States, their toll-free numbers, and has, from my understanding, Alia, you've got an extensive platform and service that allows people to change providers almost on the fly with their toll-free numbers. And Alia's also been a long standing person in the toll-free industry who has been instrumental in writing the guidelines here in North America for toll-free telephone numbers, and she's certainly very active in the toll-free governance and realm today. So, Alia, you want to take that one?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the information, because one of the things that I'm hoping is that our industry can begin to introduce this to our FCC to begin to think about moving towards a greater recognition of marketability of toll-free numbers. So the multiple carrier arrangement, we don't actually provide or have any platform of our own. What we have is the SMS, the national database that all our toll-free numbers in this country go through for routing reasons. You can build a record in that database that says if a number originates from these geographies, put it on AT&T, but if it originates from these other geographies, put it on Sprint. And you can do that by geography. You can do it time of day. If it originates this time of day, put it on AT&T. If it originates at this time of day, put it on Sprint. You can do it by percentage allocation, which we see people do to control their contracts. If they have an old contract that has a required usage on it, and then a new contract that's lower cost, they'll send a percentage of the traffic to take care of their old contract and then any overage to the new contract. So it's not something that we're doing on site. It's something that we're doing by manipulating the way the database is already set up at the national level. That allows us then, if a carrier goes down, let's say AT&T went down in just a area code that they were covering, we can immediately, and I mean immediately, within minutes, we do this on thousands of numbers, take AT&T off the record for that geography and have it go to Sprint, so that people, one person said that ATL can fix it faster than the person can call back because they think they dialed the wrong number. So it's very fast.
And who administers that national database?
There's a board that is currently made up of the 3 Bell operating companies, just sort of left over from all the, from years ago, that in January a transition committee is actually taking to the FCC a design for expanding the board to be more representative of the industry. But right now, for many years, since 1993, the board has been the Bell operating companies, which are now, due to our own merger arrangements here, down to 3.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
Mm-hmm.
And,
This is Philip. I actually have a question.
Go ahead, Philip.
I know the secondary market for toll-free numbers is prohibited in the US at this stage, and it's something you're looking at. But where is the driver behind looking at changing these arrangements? Is it an industry or a consumer, end-user, subscriber sort of thing?
Well, there's been conversation in what's called the Future of Numbering Working Group, which is an advisory committee to the North American Numbering Council, which is an advisory body for the Federal Communications Commission. So, we've spent, I think it's been about 6 years or so now, working on this white paper that was basically published, this year or last year. And we've identified a number of areas that are problematic in the administration of the toll-free telephone numbers. And, the paper only says, hey, this is an area that we've been looking at, we've been discussing, here's the issues, and, FCC, do you want us to go any further with this? And so far, we haven't gotten any indication whether the FCC is interested in going further or not. But the whole Future Numbering Working Group was originally started to take a look at, hey, what are other allocation methods that are possible? Market-based allocation being one of them. So that's kind of a long way to say that I wouldn't say there's any sort of concerted driver other than, there is a need for transferring subscribership rights to toll-free numbers. It happens. It's documented in, Securities and Exchange Commission filings. However, the regulatory glasses say that it's prohibited. So we don't have a secondary market, officially. However, numbers change hands. And, it's just kind of an area that we've talked about for a long time. It's hard to say whether it'll go any further than just talking and identifying issues. But certainly this call and certainly us talking with you folks in Australia, hopefully will raise some awareness that, hey, this can work. And it has worked in Australia. And, what might be possible in the future, we really don't know. So, Philip, does that kind of answer your question as to what the secondary market looks like, which is, officially not, there isn't a secondary market here.
Yes, thanks for that, Jay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess a sort of a different question. Obviously you're struggling with the issue of toll-free numbers. I was wondering if you had any, or if there's any interest in the market of different allocation methods for other types of numbers. In Australia, I guess with the success of our local rate and toll-free numbers, there's been some sort of discussion and attempts, I guess, from various businesses to look at other number types, and I speak specifically of what we call digital mobile numbers. and sort of attaching a sort of vanity, as you call it, I think a vanity value to those. Do you have those same issues in the US?
Well, I think it all kind of falls into the same category that, the regulatory view is that those numbers are prohibited, or those transactions are prohibited. Are there local numbers or geographic numbers out there that spell phrases that businesses are using? Absolutely. They appear in signs and advertisements and so forth. I was following a truck on the freeway here in Phoenix recently, and in huge letters across the back of this truck was 480 termite. And, obviously that person got that number somehow, and, you got to think that, well, somebody else was probably interested in that number as well. And you don't know what the history of a number is. But so the answer is, in my view at least, is that I would say there's an appetite for it. However, there has been a prohibition against the trading of both toll-free numbers as well as, geographic numbers that are non-toll-free. The fact that, Dougal, that you're saying that now there's you've kind of tested the water with your version of toll-free and local rate numbers, and now there's some sort of growing interest. Well, why don't we open this up to other codes, which we would, I would classify as non-toll-free or geographic numbers. That's interesting. But everything that I could say to you regarding local numbers changing hands is just, anecdotal. There's no official secondary market. There's no, some numbers appear on eBay. However, that's, definitely against regulatory rules. If you go to eBay and you put in toll-free numbers, you can see numbers that are listed. Now, that's a pretty shaky transaction to engage in, and in fact, in my view, it's against regulations. But there's, I would say there's an appetite for numbers that spell phrases, but certainly it makes the most sense to look at toll-free, which are primarily commercial. So does that answer your question regarding the secondary market?
That's great. Yep.
Yeah. I do have a question about, would anybody else like to comment on Dougal's question? I do have a question then. What is there any other initiative going on in the rest of the world to follow the path that Australia's paved for market-based allocation of, your telephone numbering resource?
We have heard other countries make reference to it, but we don't know specifically of any other countries' plans.
Do you know of anything that's involved with trying to get international toll-free numbers that work more universally?
I'm aware of the ITU, UIFNs, that you have to go to the ITU to get. We also make allowances in our numbering plan that some of our numbers, if a company or an individual business wants to, our Australian numbers can be called from overseas. But I understand that the pricing for those calls is regulated by international agreements rather than the ACMA, so that would be something outside our control.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured out too.
Yeah, I think it's managed through the ITU. They have like settlement rates and so on.
Dougal, are there any plans to do some sort of analysis or open up a consultation on other types of numbering resources to, have the auction process available? Or is that just talk at this point?
No, that was just me, because I'm aware that there is some anecdotal industry evidence of people being interested in that sort of thing. But I guess as a government authority, as I said, we've collected $40 million out of this system, and sorry about that. The government is obviously always interested in where it can take its slice of the pie. So, but there's no specific plans or anything firm at this point. Well, I guess we'll just sort of monitor the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to kind of put things in perspective, the population of Australia is about 25 million people.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think in the United States, our population's about 315 million, something like that.
10 times.
Yeah.
More.
So, I mean, I think $40 million in revenue is certainly significant, and more importantly, I think that having numbers go to what's termed as the highest and best user creates societal value that's very important and significant, because you can't really measure other than maybe the secondary market values of your version of toll-free numbers, but what that translates into in terms of ease of use and functionality and so forth, it's hard to put a number on that. But so let's see, any other comments from anyone?
Jay, I wanted to actually ask a question related to warehousing. I noticed in the paper that warehousing was mentioned, but that I suppose the paper indicated that it was difficult to actually identify how much warehousing is going on. What sort of mechanisms would you have if you identified warehousing? How big do you think that it might be, and kind of any other observations?
Well, warehousing is a very, let's say, fuzzy term in my view, because how can you possibly tell that a number is being warehoused? It's kind of in the eyes of the beholder. Somebody who wants the number, and if the number's ringing to a fax line, and then they might say, well, that number's being warehoused. But if the number's out there and somebody's using it as a fax number, then it's in use and it's valuable to the person using it. So, I've always had a problem with the terms hoarding and warehousing, because in my view, there's not a clear definition of that. And even if there was, how do you possibly enforce it? But let me give you some hard statistics. Last October, we opened up a brand new code for toll-free numbering, which was 855. And the amount of numbers that have been, let's say, assigned out of the spare pool have been running, generally in the tens of thousands per week to sometimes in the hundreds of thousands of numbers per week. So, we're experiencing this what I would call an enormous appetite for numbers, yet the usage of numbers, if you looked at general usage of minutes and call counts and all that sort of thing, I would say are probably declining. So, there's this incongruity that's going on where somebody's taking huge amounts of numbers out of the spare pool, and yet, the overall usage of toll-free numbers is probably on the decline. Now, some of those numbers are used for tracking advertising. So, somebody might take a number and they might put it on a web page, and, it might sit there for months or years or who knows how long, and maybe it'll, only get one or two calls, maybe, over the course of a year or two, whatever. So, is that hoarding? Is that warehousing? Who knows? But in my view, and this is, Jay Carpenter's view, there's this incongruity going on between the usage of toll-free numbers and the take of toll-free numbers from the spare pool. So I'll be quiet and I'll let anybody else comment that might have other insights.
Jay, I was just going to, add to your sort of comments. With our smart numbers that we introduced in 2004, I guess we had some similar discussion about sort of warehousing or hoarding of numbers, and for the numbers that are purchased through the auction pool, as Susan mentioned, we've actually got a particular regulation in place that says once they've won that number and paid for the number, they're expected to use it within 3 years. And if you've got a more than a 3-year period of non-connection, then the number is automatically cancelled and comes back to the auction pool. So, we routinely see, a couple of numbers a week which come back to the number pool because people haven't used them at all. But we are very much conscious of quite a lot of the numbers that are sitting out there that probably don't have what we call an active service. And as you said, whether that's a fax line or whether they've been advertised or whatever, but people probably, if they want to ring that number, actually probably won't get through because doesn't have an active service. Now, whether that's an issue or not, I guess depends on a whole lot of things. It depends on what your fundamental principles are around numbering practices and efficiency and that sort of thing. We've got 2 million numbers in this pool, and potentially more. If a small percentage of people are hoarding numbers, then is it so much a problem? I'm not going to comment on that here or now, but that's some of the things I suppose you'll probably need to have a think about depending on how you go forward.
So effectively, as long as the number has a service provider and gets one call every 3 years, it's an active number.
No, not quite like that. Somebody, for example, might have an RVA on a number, directing them somewhere else. So active is usually a number that's been allocated to a carriage service provider and is active in the INMS system. So that's sort of the starting point. What that active looks like, we're not sure, but there are actually numbers which, once they're successfully purchased through the auction pool, nobody goes to a carriage service provider and gets that number connected. They're the numbers that are withdrawn.
So can the right holder of that number put it into service so they don't get in trouble with the 3-year rule, and then take it back out of service for 2.5 years before placing it back into service without giving it up?
As long as the number was active, allocated and active, legitimate reasons why somebody would do that, so I'm not going to kind of comment, whether they're deliberately trying to circumvent the rules. So, for example, they could be a ski line who, takes them a couple of years to get the service off the ground, and then the number's only active during the winter season.
Okay.
So,
and then if I could go back to something from earlier, the smart numbers must go through the auction. I think maybe Alia touched on it. If 800 flowers, for example, in this country, if we went to this sort of mechanism, and 800 flowers was already obviously in the marketplace, why would you not want 800 flowers to be designated a smart number? Why would you? I mean, because there's no reason for an active business model that's already in play to give up that number, allow it to go back to the auction pool. I mean, because they still have a business model that's using it in that interim. So I guess I'm just curious why you decided that something that was already in play wouldn't just be automatically made a smart number.
We recognised in our rules at that time, and we continue to recognise, that a person who hasn't been through the smart numbers auction process and has an active service on a number has the rights of use to that particular number for as long as service is being provided on that number. When service ceases, the numbers would return to us. So in the example of 1-800 flowers, that would actually return to the ACMA and would become a number able to be auctioned by the Smart Numbers Pool.
Well, we're at the top of the hour, and so I'd like to, conclude to honor the timeline. And I would like to express thanks to everybody participating on this call, particularly you folks in Australia being willing to get up at extra early hour for this. It's greatly appreciated, and this call is recorded. It will be available for review. I expect it'll be posted, sometime within the next 30 days, but you can listen to the call by dialing in, and the instructions are on phoneword.com. Next month, at the end of December, we will have, on the last Wednesday in December, we will be talking about toll-free broadband. So that's an area that I think is very exciting because, the original idea for toll-free was the caller, the public, didn't have to worry about their long-distance charges. Well, I think there's a new realm for toll-free numbering that takes the worry and gives customers a peace of mind that they don't have to worry about their broadband or mobile broadband data charges. So I'm looking forward to that conversation with Thomas Saxon of Box Top TV, who's done a lot of work in this area. So, any other final comments from anyone?
Other than to thank you for the opportunity from our point of view also to talk to folks in the US about what you're doing. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks, Jay.
All right. Thank you, Don. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jay, and everyone. It was wonderful. I appreciated the dialogue and the discussion.
Thank you, Karen.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.